I want to thank you for joining us today for our webinar. And today's webinar is co-hosted by IMT and AWS. And our topic is focusing on how to start planning your migration to AWS. So today's presenters are John Wieler, VP of Sales at IMT, Larry Sylvestre, who is our Canada Healthcare Leader at AWS, and Jim Dafnis, Client Sales Leader at IMT. Today, in our webinar, we're going to cover our partnership with AWS, the partnership between IMT and AWS. We will have an overview of AWS's strengths in healthcare, which Larry will go through for us. And then we will cover IMT's approach to migration, management, and security, specifically around master data management workloads on AWS. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to hand it off to John to kick off our presentation. John?
Well, thank you, Deanna, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar this morning. We're very excited about working with AWS, with Larry this morning and presenting, and in a general sense, working with AWS. We've been working with AWS internally for many years, and within that time frame, in the last year, we've really decided to reach out and become a full-on AWS partner, so we can offer the advantages that we see working with AWS to our customers. So we've put in a lot of effort and worked very closely with AWS to become a solutions provider partner, and by establishing a cloud center of excellence so that we can give sort of very focused and very in-depth knowledge back to you as we talk about doing AWS cloud migrations. That's just the introduction. I'm now going to hand it over to Larry to talk about how AWS works in healthcare in a general sense.
Thank you very much, John. And always been a big fan of IMT, very trusted provider of master data management solutions in the industry for a long time. With respect to AWS, our CEO, Andy Jassy, once said that there is no compression algorithm for experience. And I can think of no other industry where that is more pertinent than in healthcare. In addition to being, one of the industry's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud platforms, we have over 7 years of experience with a specific focus on the healthcare and life sciences industry. And we really pride ourselves on working backwards from our customer needs. And in order to do that, we need to be able to speak our customers' language, which is why our teams have an average of over 17 years of experience in the healthcare industry. We have chief digital officers, physicians, nurses, I should say, chief medical officers, et cetera, who are part of the AWS community in the healthcare vertical, and we're here to assist you in your cloud journey. AWS's global infrastructure is unmatched in the industry with the most secure, extensive, and reliable platform. We offer over 185 services from our data centers globally, and we have millions of active customers with tens of thousands of partners around the world. We have the largest and most dynamic ecosystem that can bring many of our partners to bear for your needs, and customers from across virtually every industry and of every size, including startups, enterprises, public sector organizations, etc., are running every imaginable use case on AWS. At AWS, security and privacy remains job zero at all times. And specifically for the healthcare industry, we provide a number of global certifications and accreditations, such as HIPAA, HITRUST, GDPR, and others that allow customers to store, process, or transmit their most sensitive data in the cloud and improve their security and compliance posture while doing so. Most importantly, our shared responsibility model ensures ownership and control of the data remains with the customer at all times. So here's some examples of those 50+ certifications that I mentioned in the previous slide. That's more compliance certifications than any other cloud offering, including a variety of the examples that you see on the screen. And for our Canadian customers in particular, we have achieved Protected B compliance, and we also have worked with many of the provinces and their privacy commissioners to ensure that we have an avenue for compliance with each of the provincial legislations around health information management. And we have published frequently asked questions on our sites to assist you in understanding what that means, and we're at your beck and call to help you understand how to utilize cloud in a responsible manner in respect for your legislative requirements. As a trusted technology partner to the global healthcare industry, we have worked with customers and partners from across the globe in a wide variety of applications. And as you can see from the screen here, we've worked with national governments, providers, payers, healthcare IT vendors, academic medical centers, and more. And we work with large multinational organizations, startups, and everyone in between. Our mission remains unchanged, and that's that we obsess over customers and their challenges, and then we innovate on their behalf to help the industry lower costs and become more agile, innovate faster, and improve the lives of patients and healthcare consumers. AWS is your trusted partner in technology innovation, whether you're a builder or a buyer of technology, and we have what you need for storage, compute, analytics, AI, ML, and IoT services, and we offer professional services as well. And so we can go to the next slide if you could, please. Specifically in Canada, we're honored to have helped many of the healthcare organizations that are on this screen, or all of them, I should say, and many others that aren't on here. For example, Ontario Health grew seamlessly as demand grew for the services that the Ontario Telemedicine Network provides as the pandemic took hold in Canada. We assisted them in that endeavor, and it was a good experience for them to be able to address the needs of the healthcare consumers and professionals delivering care to their constituents. The Canadian Institute for Health Information, I should say, made a choice to go all in on AWS last year, and we were very privileged to help them along with that journey. They did so to help enhance their fiscal responsibility, their security posture, improve their ability to innovate and deliver better services faster for their users, and to achieve the benefit of a pay-as-you-go model. And lastly, I want to highlight on here AlayaCare, which is a health technology provider for home care. They are also all in on AWS. They utilize our platform to innovate rapidly to adjust their services to the growing and changing needs of their customers, as the expansion of home care services is a focus area for this country and others.
So thanks, Larry. Great overview of AWS. There's an incredible breadth of services and capabilities that we want to take advantage of and bring to our customers. So, one of the big questions is always, well, why should I migrate to AWS? Cloud has become, in some senses, the new normal, and we've already talked about that. It's, but why do you want to do it and what do you want to take advantage of is a great question, and it's different for every customer. There's no one single best way of doing it. Depends a lot of where you are right now, what you're trying to do, what advantages you're trying to gain. But having said that, there's common themes and there's common approaches, and we're going to talk about those this morning. Some of perhaps the most common discussion point is, well, I can save money. Yes, you absolutely can save money by using technology that isn't always on. You don't over provision yourself and so on. But there's lots of other reasons to do it, including some of the agility that Larry mentioned in response to COVID, to rapidly be able to use your data in other ways that are just not possible when your data is hosted on-prem. Certainly, there's and we'll talk about security in a couple of minutes, but the security posture that AWS brings, including physical security of its data centers and so on, is second to none. And in some cases, I truly believe that the AWS security model offers a much finer grained level of security than just many on-prem instances do. So we're going to talk now about how to take advantage, what you should do when moving to cloud, and how IMT, specifically to MDM, what approach we take And Jim's going to talk about that in a few slides as well. Next slide, please. So whatever your reason to move to cloud, there's sort of 5 pillars of well-architected framework that we always reference when we're talking to you about that. So they are, and you'll see these echoed in many AWS presentations. First of all, operational excellence. How do you support and develop and run workloads effectively, efficiently, know when they're maxing out, know when they're peaking, know when they're sitting idle, and continuously improve support and procedures around how do you run your workloads. AWS has a lot of different tools that allow you to monitor, check how things are going, be alerted when things aren't going well. Security, of course, is paramount. I think with this audience, it's probably should be at the very top of the list. We want to be able to protect the data. Whatever we do, the data and the protection of it is paramount. And so how do you take the tools that are there and make your security posture better than it is now? And AWS has those tools. Reliability, a lot of times reliability in healthcare is seen as high availability or disaster recovery. How do you scale your workload and make sure that it's always available? I know that's a very big challenge, especially when you're doing it on-prem and across multiple data centers. There's a lot of different costs involved, and AWS has some phenomenal infrastructure to make that almost seamless. Finally, performance efficiency. Just how do you make sure that your workloads are performing effectively, efficiently, and that you can scale them at the proper times? So the ability to scale on demand is a key part of performance efficiency and something we take advantage of in the MDM workloads as well. And finally, cost optimization, to be able to monitor your systems to make sure they're performing at peak efficiency, but you're not paying too much. And again, one of the things we see a lot of is over provisioning of infrastructure to meet a theoretical peak load, but then you're buying infrastructure every 3 years or 4 years, and you're paying a lot of money for performance that you're never going to need. And the ability to cost optimize that inside an AWS environment, to pay for peaks only when you need them, and to not pay for workload that is not being used, for instance, in dev and test environments, gives you a real advantage from the cost side. Next slide, please. So those are general benefits that any customer can realize. We want to put the focus on how do you realize them when you're moving MDM workload, and Jim's going to talk about some of the more specifics. But having said that, when we're looking at deploying MDM in AWS, we're realizing operational excellence by deploying and monitoring workloads in a specific way, using the internal event auditing functions to make sure that things are running smoothly. In terms of security, we're looking at both, in the US HIPAA compliant architectures or HIPAA ready architectures, and a Canadian provincial level, looking at specific provincial legislative requirements. There's obviously a lot of overlap between those two areas, but everybody does it. Everybody's requirements are slightly different. AWS gives you a great ability to address very specific requirements around security. And of course, data encryption at rest and in transit. Reliability, we have MDM tuned for AWS that can scale automatically on load and really takes advantage of some of the great high availability infrastructure that AWS offers. And then performance. I know that in the past, many MDM workloads take quite a while to put up, sometimes weeks, driven a lot of times by just the ability to get new infrastructure in place. You can really shorten the cycle when you're using AWS. The infrastructure takes literally seconds or at most minutes to deploy, and then you're ready to start your configuration and testing cycles. And finally, cost optimization. Just watching your costs all the time and making those cost functions available to you as a customer so you can see where the peaks and valleys are, and an interactive process to allow you to kind of monitor and adjust so you can avoid some cost functions that you're not using. So all of those fall into how we deploy MDM on AWS. Next slide, please. So I do want to say, we've talked about costs. I want to show this slide. These are general cost functions or figures. And everyone, again, will have a different experience depending on what you're doing. But AWS infrastructure can be as little as, or you'll save as much as 31%. And I believe actually more, depending on some of the use cases. The highly availability, the 24 regions, that's global. In the US, there's, I want to say 6 regions. In Canada, there's 1 region, but it has a high availability function with multiple data centers over a geography. But all that to be said is it gives you a lot of flexibility where you want to deploy. I understand in Canada, especially, data sovereignty is an important thing to think about. And so within the AWS infrastructure, data sovereignty, both in terms of processing and in terms of transmission, can be fully met by AWS. I think the last bullet here, 69% reduction in unplanned downtime, is again a result of how AWS has architected its high availability functions, both at a geographic and physical level, but also in terms of how things like databases are managed and how they can fail over seamlessly. And it's really remarkable. So, you'll see these kinds of savings and advantages when you move to AWS. Next slide, please. And, I want to emphasize this slide. As Larry said, security is job zero. We truly believe that. We work very closely with AWS security architects to define solutions or configurations that meet your personal or government level or provincial level or organizational level security requirements. And because there's so much tooling available, you can tailor-make it to meet your requirements. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution for security. And to go together with just the security configuration, there's also best practices, like who do you give access to? How do you manage access? How do you integrate with your internal identity and access management systems and things like that? So those all need to be taken into account, and they are, in terms of the shared security model, it's very important that we work both with AWS, but also with you as a customer, because your requirements are going to be unique to yourself. And so we can bridge those to give you a whole security package that you're going to be very comfortable with. So these are general remarks about moving MDM to the cloud. I'm going to turn it over to Jim. He's going to have some very specific, pointed things to say.
Thank you very much, John. So now I'll go through the next few slides and take a bit of a deeper dive on some of the things John just mentioned. Here we have a high-level diagram of the MDM architecture on AWS. The box on top shows the customer's network connected to the AWS cloud below. What we have done is we have re-platformed MDM on AWS to take advantage of features related to security, scalability, and resiliency at a lower cost and significantly less effort when compared to building and maintaining something equivalent on-premise. First thing to note, the MDM application is distributed across multiple availability zones, or AZs in AWS. Those aren't shown on the diagram. You can think of these AZs as multiple data centers. This is the foundation of a highly resilient and scalable architecture on AWS. Now I'm going to highlight some of the key AWS services that are shown on the screen and used in the architecture that we see here. On the compute side, we've got EC2 and EC2 auto scaling with load balancing, providing for automatic elasticity. And what that means is additional instances are launched during periods of high demand and then are shut down when no longer required. You pay for what you use, and you no longer need to over-provision hardware. On the database side, we have AWS Relational Database Service, or RDS. RDS handles data replication to a secondary AZ to support high availability and failover. Database backup, software patching, and instance management are handled automatically by RDS. Moving on to CloudWatch, we use AWS CloudWatch to gather metrics on AWS services and application resources, and to monitor the environment and send alerts to our support team to respond to items that require their attention. We use AWS CloudTrail. It continuously logs and retains account-related activity. We use this information to perform security analysis, operational analysis, troubleshooting, and to detect any unusual activity in your environment. Other tools like GuardDuty are used to monitor for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior to immediately alert our support team. So when planning a migration to AWS, there are several things to consider, and it's important to have a partner that understands the challenges and has a proven methodology to be successful. IMT will create a plan specific to your requirements to minimize downtime and impact to business operations. We'll start by assessing your current infrastructure, solution, and integration details. Then we'll use one of our standard models as a starting point and make tweaks as needed to right-size your AWS infrastructure footprint to ensure high performance at an efficient cost. And once the build is complete, we will connect on-premise systems and ensure connectivity is established. Things like endpoint encryption, certificates, network and account access control are configured. In terms of executing the migration, we'll start with non-production environments to validate the approach. Then we'll perform a dry run by migrating a copy of the production database to get timings and to test the cutover plan. Finally, on launch day, we'll execute a well-tested plan, cut over to AWS with as minimal disruption to users and integrated systems as possible. Next slide, please. As an AWS business partner, IMT has the skills, certifications, and experience to fully manage all aspects of the MDM system in the AWS cloud. This is a great option, especially if your organization is new to AWS, or you feel you're not quite ready to do this on your own, but see the value of hosting MDM on AWS, or have difficulty retaining a large enough in-house team with the right skills. Once the MDM production workload is operational in AWS, IMT's Platinum Application Management Service can take care of the day-to-day maintenance activities to keep things running smoothly and securely. Some of these things include 24/7 operational support and incident management for any technical issues that may arise, automatic monitoring of infrastructure, application, and networking services to detect and address issues before they affect your business, monitoring of network traffic to detect and respond to potentially suspicious activity and to actively maintain a high level of security. We offer web, email, and telephone incident management with well-defined service levels for response, resolution, and escalation paths to our senior support personnel. We offer comprehensive operational support from the MDM application, the interfaces, to the operating system, database, networking services, and so on. IMT can be your single point of contact to manage MDM on AWS. That's my last slide. With that, thank you for your attention. Back over to you, John.
Well, thanks, Jim. Hopefully I'm not on mute right now. What Jim has really described is, just an overall approach to migrating your production workload on MDM. You don't have to start there. There's many ways of taking advantage of AWS with your MDM workload. So each one of these steps, and they're not necessarily in order, can give you value. So you can start by moving your non-production workload. Typically dev and test instances are very good to put on AWS because you can turn them on and off as required and certainly save a lot on infrastructure. And then you can scale up your dev instance, for instance, if you want to test high demand conditions and turn it down later on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of dev and test management. I know that we have customers who, have many dev instances. They bring them up for a specific project, and then, in AWS, when that project is finished, you turn them off, and you don't have to worry about, having redundant hardware that you're paying for. The second step in the middle is something you can do either when you have your production workload on cloud or not. You can quickly trial, implement MDM-related solutions, for instance, using the MDM data to do some data analytics, like on Insight ID, which is an IMT data analytics solution for MDM data, or migrating your MDM data for secondary use in some way. There's lots of different and very interesting things you can do on AWS, including some AI modeling, and I think Larry said there's 170 services. Within the secure framework, you can take advantage of those services. Quickly trial things. If it doesn't work out, you turn it off, and you're not continuing to pay for it. So to take advantage of that, you really have to sort of think of outside the box a little bit. And say, I can do this, it doesn't cost me a lot, and it gives me tremendous business advantage knowing how I can exploit the MDM data that I'm already managing. And then finally, as Jim mentioned, we can put the entire workload on MDM on the cloud with, as good as or better security, availability numbers for you. So you have trust that you can, use MDM as the critical business function that it is for you. So next slide. So, I think that, finally, we want to say, let us help define your AWS migration strategy. As we said, there's more than one way to do it. We really love to talk to you about where you see the value, help us work with you to define what value points you want. Sometimes there's triggers in terms of when you want to start a migration. If you're doing a bunch of local infrastructure replacement, it's a great time to start thinking about cloud. If you've got an upgrade pending, an MDM upgrade, and I'll have to say MDM version 12 is out, just came out a few weeks ago. Time to start thinking about that upgrade. Putting that upgrade and using a cloud migration to do part or all of that work is a very good idea. If you're suffering from declining support skills, we have customers who have that issue. Using things like our platinum support and putting it up in the cloud is a really good idea. If you're worried about performance and scalability, particularly secondary workload functions that are driven by COVID or by other reasons, new security requirements, just the need for additional functionality, those are all good reasons to say, hey, let's talk to IMT about moving our MDM to the cloud and taking advantage of all the functionality that's there. So final slide, please. So what can we do to help you today? We'd love to work with you. I mean, I think that's clear. We would love to start a conversation that gives you a sort of a firm deliverable and what we call a cloud assessment. So it's really working through your requirements, working through any of the trigger points that we talked about on the previous slide, doing a risk and vulnerability assessment, seeing what kind of security framework and security tools we need to put in place to satisfy your security requirements, and assist in talking through that strategy with other people in your organization. We're getting a lot of interest now from people on the data science side and saying, how can I use MDM data? Well, that might be a good reason to have a discussion with them. So if you're at all interested, we'd love to talk to you about this, especially when we run into interesting and unique situations. We're also going to bring in AWS people, architects, security specialists, and so on, to help us define exactly the right solution for you. So it's very much a partnership. And AWS has a lot of really, really smart people that we've learned to really appreciate and lean on, especially for some of the more interesting and obscure edge cases. So thank you for your attention. That's the end of our seminar formally. We'd love to have some Q&A with you. As Deanna mentioned, please put your comments and questions into the comments box or questions box, and we'll try and get to them right now.
Yes, I do have a few questions to tee up for you guys to answer. So the first question I have is, can I use my current IBM MDM license in AWS, or do I have to relicense? I think, John, could you take a cut at that one?
Sure. You're absolutely able to use your current IBM MDM license. There's no limitations in terms of the license on where you can run your workload. So running part of it on the cloud or all of it on the cloud, that's absolutely allowable.
Okay. All right. Next question is, does moving MDM to AWS affect the support that I receive from IBM? Jim, do you want to try that one?
Sure. You're fully supported to run MDM in AWS by IBM. As long as you keep the software maintenance up, the SNS is in good standing with IBM, you're entitled to support from IBM as well as software entitlement. So thinking about a migration, a good opportunity to do a migration is in tandem with a software upgrade. So you'll need your software entitlement in good standing as well to do an upgrade.
Okay, great. And I think I have another one for you, Jim. From an architecture perspective, are you hosting MDM on AWS based on containerized platforms or virtual machines hosted on AWS?
We support both models. The one I described today was non-containerized, but we do have an architecture that supports containers. Yes.
Okay, great. Larry, I'm going to pose this one for you. So what does IMT and AWS do to ensure that the data stays in Canada?
That's a great question, and we hear it frequently. AWS uses, and I think I said this before, we use a shared responsibility model where AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, and the customer is responsible for the security of the information that they put in the cloud. And what that really means is that customers always have a choice as to where they want their data to reside, as we have a global infrastructure, as we talked about earlier. That said, our solution architects and other implementation teams have a great deal of experience in helping customers to put the appropriate guardrails in place to ensure that their data aligns to whatever their policies are about data residency or data security and encryption. So we're there to help you with ensuring that those guardrails are in place to help you satisfy your data residency requirements. And it is certainly possible for us to achieve any certification that we're aware of right now in the Canadian landscape or in the international one.
Okay, great. And then I think two more. This one will be for Jim. Can I use my current database licenses in the cloud if I use Oracle today?
There are a couple options for migrating or for Oracle licensing in AWS, and that goes for SQL Server for that matter. You can purchase the license from AWS, what's called the license included option with the RDS instances or standalone Oracle instances. They're running on EC2. Yeah, so that's the first option. The second option is to migrate your on-premise or your enterprise Oracle license to AWS. You can do that as well. Now that's subject to the terms of your Oracle licensing agreement. So there are some nuances there that we can, help you look at to make sure that you're in compliance with the license.
Okay, and then I think what will be our last question is more oriented towards, I think, IMT support services. So the question is, from an operational support perspective, does IMT offer data steward services? So for example, if an organization doesn't have experienced data steward users to handle inspector tasks.
I can take that one. So IMT in itself does not do data stewardship, but we do have partners who can do that. So, I mean, that's entirely possible. The other thing to consider there is that there's interesting technologies introduced that reduce data stewardship tasks using some AI and automation techniques. So happy to have a discussion around that as well.
Great. So I think that we went through all of our questions. Oh, looks like we just got another one. This one is related to security. So as far as encryption is concerned, are you storing sensitive PI/PHI encrypted? And or do you have the discretion to define what tables are encrypted? So I think it's a question about encryption and flexibility of encryption.
Yeah, let me take that one as well, and Jim chime in here as well. In general, especially with healthcare, our customers are asking us to encrypt absolutely everything. So yes, we store everything. It's at the database level, it's encrypted. There's more than one way of doing that, and love to have a discussion around what your requirements are. Can some database tables or columns be unencrypted? Yes, there is that ability. There are some requirements around how the tables are defined in the table spaces, and so some technical requirements or ways of doing that. And some of it is dependent on the storage mechanisms used, and some of it is dependent on the kind of databases used. But there are options around that. But I have to say again, in most cases, anything associated with PHI, even if the say column is not specifically PHI, everything gets encrypted, and that's probably just the easiest way of doing it in any case.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we'd like to dig into those requirements on why you would want to have some unencrypted tables. To have a HIPAA ready architecture, right? We want to encrypt all data endpoints, all data at rest, databases, file stores, etc. Encrypt everything, right? Just the off chance that PHI might go into an unencrypted space, right? Is just a concern, is what the concern is. So we'd like to get into those requirements.
Okay. Well, I think that we've reached the end of our questions and end of our webinar. So we want to thank everyone here for attending. As I said, we will be sending out a link to the recording so that you can share that or review it again. And of course, please reach out to your account representative or to John or Jim or sales@imt.ca to talk any more about our AWS migration programs. We'd be happy to dig into some more of the requirements and questions as follow-ons to some of the ones that you posed today. So thank you so much. Thanks for being interactive, and we hope everyone has a good rest of their week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.